Okay, hey guys. What I wanted to do is walk through the steps of this next exercise, the 2D abstract photo montage. Again, a lot of the steps are um, very similar to the previous exercise or the previous photo montage that you worked on. It's going to have the same basic elements. There are some more requirements here in terms of the scale in which you're placing some of the images on the 11 by 17 sheet to allow for this to be interpreted three-dimensionally at a reasonable scale. And so when you're thinking about the overall sheet, and here it discusses thinking about the 11 by 17 as basically the limits to the property lines that you might work in. Think about this relative to about an 1/8 inch scale. Okay, that's going to bring the overall width of this 17 inches to about 130 feet by about 80, 90, about 90 feet for the 11-inch dimension. So an 1/8 inch, it's going to be about 130 by about 90. So again, think about that as the property that we'll be working on. That is the located site. Again, it's hypothetical here in this case, and so just think about and imagine where you might position two streets relative to the site. So that's one of the steps here. So again, in this tutorial, I'm going to go a little bit quicker through some of these. I'm going to walk through most of these steps in Photoshop and Illustrator. Okay, so again, I mentioned I'm just going to use my space bar to pan around here. It's a quick panning tool. I'm just using, and I already moved this stuff over, but this is from the previous layout. This is from the previous exercise. So this is the part of the example that I showed you guys. Some of the images have been removed and so forth, but this is part of it. So I just opened this file up from the previous exercise and saved it as the new file. So I would have a new project folder, exercise folder with this, with the various folders. Again, you can interpret this your own way, but the one I like to use, or some of them I like to use, working, raw, and final for print. Those are the ones I know that those are the finished, more or less, the plot files. So right now I'm in working, and I saved that Illustrator file here. So that's what I have open. Now you'll notice as well that I've already placed this image. Again, the requirement is for it to be no more than 1/4 of the overall 11 by 17 sheet. Here it's much smaller. It's going to give me a lot more room to work. And it's going to give me a lot more room to, again, interpret and extend and be able to elaborate on this. This is an image. You can see it's kind of a corner condition. Here's what was a curtain wall going up, and here's some ceiling, translucent tiles here. And so all these intersecting things are giving me some perspective lines that I can extract from. But I'm immediately going to remove that from the context that the image was taken. So in your case, it's the athletic center, the training center there. But I'm going to forget that this image was taken from whatever context it was. In this case, it's the Inland Steel building in Chicago. And I'm just going to concentrate on those perspective lines. I'm just going to drag those out and allow those to inform some experimental study here. I'm just experimenting with how to compose space, how to articulate space, how to characterize space. Okay, so I have the drawing or the drawing overlay already created. I have it, let's see, right here, overlay lines. So I had scanned that in and created this. I already double clicked on this. This would come in, the layer would come in as background. So I already double clicked and called it layer 1 so I can work with it. And I'm going to go ahead and walk through the alpha channel technique to remove this white. I just want the black lines. So I selected the overall image, Control C for copy. I'll move to my channel. I'm going to add a new channel, the alpha channel. I'm going to paste that image, there. Then I'm going to invert this image. So then it's just going to cancel everything else out. Basically, the alpha is saying that whatever is black is going to go away, and whatever is going to remain is the white. So that's why we're inverting it. And I can now deselect, go back to my layers. I'm going to create a new layer here down at the bottom. Layer 1 is fine. I still have this background layer on. I guess I'll just leave that on for now. I'm going to go ahead and load that alpha channel, load that selection. So the selection from the alpha, say OK. Now I have those selection lines, and I was using the paint bucket before. Another way that you can fill those lines is, well, first of all, making sure that my foreground color is black. Another way I can do this is in Edit. I can go down here to Fill, and it's going to ask me for different options in terms of how to fill that selection. In this case, I want to fill it with the foreground color, so it was selected appropriately. And there are others here. I can go to the background color. If you're trying to modify an image, say like a sky or vegetation, you can let it be content aware, so that's where you can remove an anomaly in another image, and that's something you can play around with later, but there is that option. But here I'm going to stick with foreground color because I just want the black. I say OK. So now it filled that in, and we can see that here, that it's filled, and I can then go Control D, deselect, and I have the image here, the lines ready to go. So then I could save this as the PNG file. Still in working, so I'm in the right space here. Overlay lines, PNG, I say save. Okay. I can close this out, and I could save this as a PSD if I wanted to. I'll just go ahead and do that. Alright, so that is now saved. I can close this out. Said yes. Okay, there we go. Alright, now we can come back here. I can, to Illustrator now, go to my line overlay, and I'm going to bring those lines in. So the PNG file is what I want. It should already be 11 by 17 because that's what I based it on. If there's a discrepancy in size, that would be because you may have scanned it in as a higher resolution than what Illustrator is set up for, in which case you'd have to reduce it down. But it should pretty much lock itself into position here. So you can see all these lines were relative to some of the perspective lines that were coming from that image. Okay, so now I have that together. So the next would be to I'm going to jump to the materials here. So you have to bring in some materials. Really just looking for textures in this case. So I just want some textures to come through, something that's going to fill in some of these fields. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and save this layout. So I'm just going to say save. And the reason why I'm going to take this approach is that if I bring an image in, whatever image it might be, say this image, I can't really like crop out sections of it here in Illustrator, right? Because Illustrator is more so for layout and illustrating. It's not necessarily for image manipulation. That would be where I would come in with and use Photoshop would be more appropriately. Control C that. Also, if you're having trouble with selections, you see here I'm trying to select that image. I could select over here and be fine, but if you get to the point where you're having trouble selecting because it's always selecting the image on top, I can right click, and in select I can say next object above or below, next object below, and then it will select the next object that's below. So it's thinking about how they're layered together. So that's one way to get around that. So again, I want to be able to manipulate the image and cut and carve or do whatever to these images in Photoshop, because that's the appropriate tool to do that. I have a problem with my selections again. Control Z. So here's an instance where I have to select object, next object below. If they're on different layers as well, then I could just lock the layer that this is on, and then it would only select the appropriate object. Okay. Jeez, get out of here. All right. This back. All right. Okay, so I had already saved this. I'm going to go ahead and close it. I'm just going to say, well, I'll save it just in case. And now I'm going to find that image here, and this is the file that I was working on. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say open with Photoshop. I don't know why it's not giving me that option. Another way to do it would be just to open Photoshop. I should be able then just to drag this over here. I could say OK to all of this. Okay, so now I have it, and it's maintained its transparency. So then what I want to do is find my textures. And here I have a couple wood textures here. And I'm going to open it up in Photoshop. I want to open it up as a separate file. So if I just drag it over into this layout, and I hit enter, see what it will do here, it automatically creates a smart object thumbnail. So I can't necessarily crop it and manipulate it as freely. I have to open it in another file and then go through that process. So I want to work with the image directly. So I'm going to Control Z or undo that selection, go back to my file, and I could right click and say open in Photoshop. So I could do it that way, or if I drag it over and I hover around the top, it's going to have this plus copy, and that's going to open it up into its own separate file. Then I could just take this tab and I'm going to drag it down, and all I'm going to do to get this image on this file in a way that I can manipulate it freely, I'm just going to take the layer and drag it over and drop it into this layout. So there it is. Now I can close this, and I could do the same for the other. So I'll open it here to the top. I'm just holding, left click and holding the tab down. I'm just dragging it down so I can see the other layout, and I'm going to drag this one over. Okay. Not too concerned about the scale of these. Again, I'm just looking for the texture at this point. Alright, so those came in as separate layers. I'm selected this layer. You can see I can start to manipulate this. I think I had this image down here somewhere for the previous example that I showed. But I could make it bigger if I wanted. I'll hit enter. I distorted it a little bit, and maybe I'll move it down just so it's hitting that, so I can capture as much of this grain as possible. I'll move down to this other layer and move this one into position. It's a little bit hard doing this because the lines are below and these images are on top, so I'm just going to take my layer 1, drag it to the top. Now the lines are on top. I can see exactly what I'm doing relative to those, let's call them regulating lines. If I wanted to maintain, again, the proportion of the image, I could hold my shift key down, and that's going to help me keep the proportion of the original image. So let's say that's fine. I'll include that. So now I can just start to erase parts of these as they correspond to various sections from the regulating line. So I'm just going to use my lasso tool here, the polygon lasso tool, and just making selections around. I just did this so the line was nice and straight. Oops, I didn't do that right. Escape, there it is. And then I can just hit delete. So carve that up. Control D, and I wanna try to make sure. I want to maintain, get this corner in there. Hopefully that will be the case. Actually, it won't. Control Z, what I just did. Go back to my history. Make sure. I want to make sure that this edge is going to hit that corner. So I'm going to come here and there. Okay. Control deselect, get my move key, the selection tool, I'll set it in there. Okay, back to the lasso tool. I just hit my L as a shortcut to get to the lasso tool. Alright, so actually maybe I'll start here. There. There, then I'm going to go around because I want to erase everything but that. I go back here and there's that little circle that shows up. That means I'm going to close the selection, and then I can delete that. And then I'm going to deselect it. Now if I jump to the other layer, I can do the same for this other image. Maybe I want to start here, and I'm just going to work my way through this. So I'll just go all the way down. Okay. There's that little circle again. Delete. Deselect. Okay, so now I have these fields that I can work with. And I'm going to allow this to overlap beyond, maybe on top of the image in the actual Illustrator file, so that's why that's looking a little funky, but it's hitting that corner right now. Okay, so this is looking okay. So I'm going to turn off layer 1 because I just now want these areas to bring that over into Illustrator. I'm going to save this as, and you guessed it, a PNG file. I already had one, let's see here, textures 1. That was what I created before, so I called it textures 1. I'm actually going to be saving over the other one I had created. But textures 1, so I know it's just all those textures together as a PNG file. I can hit save. I'm replacing it in this case. You'll have a new file most likely, so you won't have that. Okay, then I can close this out, and I do not want to save over that original. So make sure the document folder will be closed after saving has completed. Oh, so it's still saving the PNG. It's taking a little bit of time there. No, I do not want to save that because I want to keep the original Illustrator file intact. Okay, so we are back here. You'll notice as well that I went ahead and just for the sake of illustrating, I'm assuming that the streets are here at this corner. So street A, street B, and I'm concentrating on this corner condition. That was part of the reason why I placed the image where I did, to kind of anchor this corner in some way, allowing for some transition. You know, it's meant to be a gallery, so it's not necessarily a typical building that might be all the way up on the street edge, so it's a little bit more playful than that, so it's set back a little bit. So that's why I placed it there. Let's see. So I don't have a textures layer yet, so I'll create a textures layer. I just want those to be separate, and I can move those around. I think in this case at least behind the drawing overlay is where I want those to be, so I can go to the working file, step back here, and the PNG, textures PNG, that's the one I just created. That should show up on the textures layer, and to avoid over selections here, I can start locking these other layers, and that's going to help clean up some of these selections, so I don't have to constantly right click and get to the select next object below and all of that. I could just do it by layer management, which is a little bit more efficient, I think. Okay, so I have it there. One thing that I didn't do was manipulate the layers, and so in Photoshop, if you wanted to do that, and I could still do that here, I'll just double click and open this up. It should open up, it's opening up in the viewer. So it's a combined layer together. So I could, manipulate this brightness and contrast. I can play around with that. I could blur it or do different things there just to try to do something a little bit different with it. Maybe I want to desaturate this just a little bit since I bumped up the contrast. I'll just calm that down a bit, say okay. I could potentially do some blurring or something like that if I wanted to, or maybe play around with some of these other layers. I could probably create a whole other texture. Here, this is the filtered gallery, and so this is adding a graphic pen layer to it. So you can kind of play around with this if you want to manipulate it somehow. So let's say, I don't know, let's say I go with that. Maybe that's okay. Took the color out, I could add some tonality if I wanted to, but I don't know, maybe it's just those textures that I want. But I'm going to bring those colors back. I'm not going to save this, just for the sake of this one. Maybe I'll just go ahead and save this as something else, or I could go through the alpha process and just get these lines if I wanted to work with those. So I'm going to say textures 1A, just so it's not saving over the other, and if I want to bring that in, maybe I do 95%, and then it should, there, okay. No, I don't want to save over texture 1, so I'll leave that. So now I have 2 of these, and I can bring this one over into Illustrator. I could position it, that's over the other one. I have that selected and not the image below selected, so I could play around with the opacity of it. Maybe I wanted it to kind of breathe through a little bit. So I don't know. Maybe that works. So some of the next things. So that was one of the bigger sort of steps that is a little bit different than what you're going to have to deal with in terms of getting these together. There's probably other ways, or numerous other ways that you could achieve that same goal in terms of cropping these images and so forth. But that one seemed to be a little bit more direct with the layout and the drawing at hand. Instead of trying to do it blindly in a separate file that doesn't have the line work, that would be much more difficult, I would imagine. So the other things that I already created a title text here, and it's on a locked layer, so I can lock textures. Unlock my title text. Now I can just select it. And maybe I want it to, I don't know, be on this line or something. Maybe it's a little bit closer there. So I can just start rotating this text. Just grabbing the corner there. You can see the little cursor, the arrow changes as you get closer to the corner. There it is. And so then I can tweak the angle, get it to line up kind of nice, and I don't know, maybe I'm happy with that. So I'll keep that, and this is just me playing around with the font. So this is like Technique Bold here, and I think this is like an italic, I don't know if that's italic Arial bold or something. So I was just playing around with the text, as opposed to just having it be straightforward text, to have something a little bit more dynamic. Let's see, now body text, I can unlock that, get on that layer, and maybe I just want to create a quick shape here. So I'm going to use my pen tool. Maybe I want that text to be in this space right here, so I can create a shape that fits more or less into this space, and these guidelines are pretty helpful for direct horizontal and vertical lines. I'm not holding any key down, it's just letting me do this. And those are some nice updates to Illustrator. Here, see that little circle? It's hard to see the little circle there, but that'll let me close that selection. Okay, now I can go to the text area type tool, and then if I just select that area, you can see here now I can have text in that area. You'll have specific text that has you describe what this is about in terms of layering, in terms of intersection, overlap, adjacencies, think about space, think about principles, and so forth. Here, I'm just going to copy paste this placeholder text. So I'll say I just selected it, the inside, Control C, come back here, and I'm going to select this, and I'm just going to paste it right in there, Control V. You have to be careful when you're using your space bar with the text tool, because if I'm in here and I now hit my space bar for a pan, it's going to start spacing in the text, right? So I have to make sure to go back to my toolbar here, selection tool, select away from that, now I can pan around. Some of the other things that I did was to include, I can lock this layer now, just some other dimension to it. Maybe it's a little stark at this point, and maybe I wanted to give it a little bit more depth, so that's where I added some shapes in the previous example that I had shown. So I'm going to put that on image background, and so then I'm just going to again use make sure it's unlocked, and then use my pen tool. Again, I could zoom in. I can hold my Alt key down and my scroll wheel and really zoom in and get to some specific areas here. So I can do that. Maybe it's here and then there, and then it cuts back. And I can zoom out using holding Alt key and then my scroll wheel. I can hit that and then go directly up here to this line, zoom back over to where I started and close this puppy up. There we go. And right now the image, you'll see it is, this is behind the texture, so I could take the texture here and just drag it down, and now this is over. And now that this layer, this is showing it that it's full black in terms of its opacity, but since if I get back to my selection tool, I should be able to control the opacity here. So I just clicked back on it, and here's opacity, and I could dial that down to 60% or 70%, something like that. I could give it another color if I wanted to as well. Doesn't have to be black, of course. And you can do that with your swatch tools over here. You can have those, or if you wanted it to be a color from an image, maybe, I don't know, maybe I wanted some of these wacky colors over here from the sky. I can use my eyedropper tool. So I just went down here for eyedropper tool, and I can select that area. You can see the fill color changed. And then I should be able to take this and add it to my swatches. So I just click down on it and just drag it over to my swatches. I'll drop it in. So there's that color. And then I could go here and select this shape, and I have the fill color in the foreground here, so then I could color it that pink. Or whatever other color I wanted to use here. So you can work with that as well. And maybe, I don't know, I think that's about it. I think that looks decent. So I'm just going to leave it as is. And, that's basically the major components here, right? I have the original image. It's nice and small. I have the overlay drawing. that's there. I have these other textures that are just, I don't know, maybe those are indicative of site design or topography, or maybe they influence what happens here as we start to interpret this three-dimensionally. I don't know. It's just an experiment. I'm just exploring with texture, materiality, orientation. Of course, I'm thinking about this in plan, so thinking about spatial relationships and so forth. But I think this is okay. So then I would want to save the overall Illustrator file, and it's going to process here, and then I could print it. Then here, and I want to select the Adobe PDF file, and this should be an available driver when you download and install Adobe Acrobat from your Creative Cloud. So I already have it set to that. I could print it directly to a printer here, one of these others, but I'm going to get the image file here. If I want to make sure it's higher resolution, I can click here to set up, and I just want to continue through this warning. It's selecting here this driver, so I can hit preferences. Now I'm into the Adobe Acrobat or the PDF Maker driver, and I could say, okay, I want it to be high quality print, and everything else I think looks fine. You could also select press quality, so I'll stick with high quality. So hopefully it will retain some detail. Say okay, print. Back here, that should be good to go. Print. It's going to ask me where to print it, and I believe this is 2A, so this is the right file, so I'll go into my file for print. And I already printed one before. If I wanted to print a different version of it, maybe I would call it example 2. Or let's say 1A, because it's derivative of the same one. So I can distinguish between the two. I could also give it a date. I didn't give it a date. That's helpful, so you just know when you created it. So now it's just photo montage there, and I could go back into my folder, file for print. Here's the one I just created. I'll click that, and I'm going to give it the date, which is 0203, so 17th year, February the 3rd, and then, oops, I hit my cat key on. Montage, example, I'm going to shortcut it, say 1A, and click away. So now I have that separate from this previous version that I showed before. That's now different from this version. A little bit different. Okay, then the steps for submitting are the same. You would walk through the screen capture for each Photoshop and Illustrator. You would add that to this file, again, over here with the thumbnails. You just expand that, and then you just can drag and drop other PDF files or what have you here. You can reorganize it if I want this to be first and these second. This isn't the screenshot. Yours would be a screenshot. This is the other version, of course. And even if it's an image file, JPEG, I could still do the same thing. Just drag those in, and then I could save this. I can just keep it as the same, just save it so that I know it has all of those together, or you might just call it all or something like that. Exercise 1 all. So now I know all of those are in there. I have all different files in here. Again, yours would have the screenshots, and then I would go and navigate to the OneDrive folder, which I already have open here, in the student work. I'll go back to my folder that I created, and I just have an X1, so I'll create an X2, exercise 2, create, get into that folder, find the PDF file, here it is, and drag and drop that file in there. So it took a little bit, and there it is, available for review. So that should be about it. Again, for coming up, the steps to work towards are placing that found image from the Athletic Center into the overall sheet. creating the outline of the drawing overlay, so those lines, at least having those pretty much together and ready to go for on Tuesday, where then you can get into bringing textures in, filling in some of these fields and so forth, and working with it that way. Other than that, the steps are again very similar, with the exception of the materials, what we do with the materials here. So again, it should be a review and it should go a little bit quicker than the previous exercise. Great, well thank you for watching, and until the next one.